Oh, Magat.
All right. And the leader of opposition?
Here, my name is Adam Kasman, and I will be doing the reply.
Thank you. Can I have the deputy?
Hello, yeah, and I'll be doing the reply for government as well.
All right. Thank you. The deputy leader of opposition?
Here, I am Deputy Leader of Opposition, and my name is Adam Haikal.
All right. Thank you. Government whip?
Carries here, government whip.
All right. And opposition whip?
Email, I will be opposition whip.
Thank you very much. Just give us a few moments. I'm just waiting for the go ahead before we start today's debate.
Right, everyone can start debating.
Before I start, can everyone see my screen?
Yeah, it's a timer, right?
Yes, correct.
Yeah.
Thank you. Are all the judges here? I'm just checking. All the judges. Present.
Here,
Present.
I'm here. Yeah,
I'm here.
Thank you. All right. Okay. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the grand finals of the 10th Muslim International School Debating Championship 2021. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the moment we have all been waiting for. Who will debate their way to the champion of this year's Muslim International School Debating Championship for the English category? My name is Carlos Sebastian John, and I will be your speaker for this round as well as the timekeeper. Chairing today's debate, we have Mr. Amirul Ashraf alongside Mr. Taki, Mr. Ayman Zuhaili, Mr. Azim Nadzari, Mr. Al-Kindi, Mr. Hafiz Mureza, and Mr. Amirul Shakir as the panel. Ladies and gentlemen, we have on the government side Sekolah Tuanku Abdul Rahman, and on the opposition side, Sekolah Dato Abdul Razak. Today's debate will be live streamed, and please feel free to visit the link in the Telegram group to watch it from there. Before we begin, I would also like to remind the spectators and audience to remain silent and kindly change your Zoom name into spectator for us to distinguish debaters and adjudicators from others in the Zoom room. A reminder again to turn off your cameras and please mute yourselves to avoid disturbance. As you all know, each speaker will speak for 7 minutes only. Without further ado, on the motion, this House supports the right for doctors to strike, I call upon the first substantive speaker, the Prime Minister, Mr. Magat Akhtar. Hear, hear.
All right. Beginning my speech in
3 to 3 to doctors, healthcare professionals, and healthcare workers have a high or the most contributing members of society. Therefore, government side should give them a platform or a pedestal to voice out their demands, their complaints, and their opinions. Therefore, on the government side, on the proposition side, we support the rights of doctors to strike out. So what does a proposition side look like? We have 3 levels of setup. The first one is, what is the meaning of strike out? Strike is when doctors or workers voice out their complaints and their demands by not coming to work at a specific point in time, not coming to an appointment, for example. And that's the first level of setup. The second level of setup is we support that the doctors have a strike, meaning that the doctors would choose which appointment are convenient for them to strike out, meaning that they would choose and they would manage which appointment where they are not needed, in case that caveat strikes, in case that if they are needed, they wouldn't strike out because it is a caveat side. For example, where surgery is planned for them, meaning that if they don't, if they strike out, a victim or a patient will die from that result.
POI.
From that result. All right. So understand that this is a value judgment debate, meaning that it is a question of whether you should or should not, and not a question of whether you can or cannot. All right. So what are we trying to prove here? We're trying to prove 2 things, which is, first, it is principally justified to grant the doctors the ability to voice out, the abilities to strike out, and second, it maximizes the efficiency of their healthcare system and of their healthcare professionals. First argument: how is it principally justified for us to grant these doctors to strike out? Firstly, they are workers, meaning that they are a contributing member to society. For example, farmers, doctors, and other contributing members of society deserve the rights to voice out, especially if their work is in regards to their contribution, meaning that the more they contribute to the society, the more we should give them the rights to voice out, in this case, the rights to strike out. And it is in terms of this debate, in terms of doctors, their contribution is saving life, their contribution is helping life, their contribution is helping in extending the rights to live for someone. Therefore, is it really fair for us to take away their voice, for us to take away their rights to strike out? Is it really fair for us to silence them, even though they have been contribute to the state the most out of all workers in society? Before I move on to my next level, POI.
POI, you said that they are going to strike during when they are not needed, meaning that nothing is affected in the healthcare system. Then how are you ensure that these doctors are able to get what they want with that system and mechanism?
Meaning that they won't strike out in appointment where they are not needed, but they're needed in society. They're needed in society, but when they are mostly meaning that when they have a surgical plan, meaning that where if they don't come to work, a patient will die. Therefore, they shouldn't strike out. That's the meaning of caveat strike. All right. Moving on. What is the significance of this principle? The workers, in this case, the doctors, are a slave to the state, or where the opposition side is suggesting right now, the status quo right now, where we don't let them to strike out, they are in turn the slave of the state, meaning that they are scrapped. They only contribute to the state because it is convenient for the state, because therefore they are slave, therefore they have no rights to voice out, no rights to strike out, meaning they are choked and their voice are limited. This leads them to suffer in bad working conditions while they are still paying taxes to the state. They're still paying taxes while still contributing in the helping and saving of life of people and public in the state. And this is it really fair for us to silence them when they're suffering in bad conditions, where their contribution is the highest out of all workers in the state, or all workers in the state. And this leads to my third level, which is the opposition would argue that what about the people's life? What about the people's life that are being lost when they're strike out? This will not happen on our side because caveat strikes mitigate this harm, meaning that they would manage and they would choose which appointment to not prioritize, meaning that they will not choose appointment where they have a surgery in plan, where appointment where if they do not come, patients will die, for example. This will give them benefit as well. And moving on to my final level, which is this is them voicing out about the state mistakes in the first place. Because notice that doctors strikes out because of the state mistakes in the first place. Then why are we silencing them? Why are we silencing them? Meaning that they only strike out when they notice that it is the state mistakes towards them and towards the healthcare system and the state in general. Meaning that they will voice out if the state can't handle the pandemic, for example. They will voice out, they would strike out when there's inefficient tools or materials for healthcare. They would voice out when they have uncomfortable workplace, when they are abused by patients, for example, by corporate entities, for example, when they are given inefficient and unfair wages for them to work in uncomfortable places, for example. And this in turn increase the healthcare productivity and the healthcare system in general. All right, moving on to comparisons. On our side, comparatively, we treat them as actual human beings that contribute to the states, whereas on the opposition side, we're treating them as robots, as not even humans, as people that we can't even provide them with a pedestal or a place for them to voice out for the unfairness and on the state's mistakes in the first place. And we contribute to the state by in the state program environment allow other people to contribute. Meaning that support the government side if you want equality between the state and if you want doctors to voice out in the first place, support proposition side. Thank you.
Thank you to the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister spoke for a total of 7 minutes and 30 seconds. I think the Prime Minister's speech was very reflective also of his ambition of being a future doctor, a future therapist as well. He believes that they have the right to speak out when they're not given the due resources and as they are workers as well. Now, I would like to invite the Leader of Opposition to deliver his speech. Here.
Hello there. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
All right, good. All right. I will start my speech in 3, 2, 1. In today's debate, there's something very important that I have to point out for side government, and when I POI them, they truly don't understand that question. What is the problem under side government? The first problem is that they stated that, oh, these doctors would only do strike and not go to work when they're being on call, for example, when they don't have an appointment. This is the type of strike that they do. But here's a problem that they don't see in their case. Number one is that the reason why a strike exists in the first place is to hurt the higher ups, the one in authority, in order for them to give what this doctor wanted. So if you to go to strike when you are not needed, therefore there's no harm, there's no apparent harm towards the healthcare system. Therefore, we don't see any change. We don't see how can it help these doctors achieve what they wanted. For example, better mental health care for them, or maybe better resources for them. We don't see how these doctors will get that if they were to do this very soft type of strike, which I don't think would even work, because side government is truly trying to go hardline on us by trying to take that into consideration. I believe that does not work, that does not even benefit this doctor in the end of the day. So I believe that on their side, that case truly cannot stand. There's a few things that need to be clarified in today's debate on the side opposition. A few very important clarification. Number one, what is the rights? So understand that everybody have rights, sure, but also everybody have a rights to a certain extent where your right should not suppress or harms other people's life. In today's case, if this doctor were to go on a strike, a real strike, okay, not like side government strike where nobody goes to work, they truly give up on every patient. Believe that what happens is that you are violating other people's rights. So other side government, are you trying to value a one person right to protest to maybe 9 or 10 people's right to live? This is something this is a heavy burden that side government need to carry into this, and they need to prove to me how is it possible. Secondly, doctors. Understand that doctors already have taken a vow during the start of their responsibility, where they have to take a vow whereby they need to take care of everybody's life. And one very important thing in this vow is that they need to prioritize other people's life before themselves. This is a vow that every doctors have taken. So if you was to say that this doctor were to go on a strike and destroy these other people's right to live and their life, they have broken that vow and also contradict themselves. So how do we solve this problem of having of these doctors not getting what they want? One of the things that you need to understand, in a hospital system, there is an authority of power, meaning to say that there are the president of the particular hospital, they have the vice president, and so on and so forth. What these doctors need to do is that they need to form something like a labor union in which these doctors work together and also negotiate with this authority in order to get what they want, rather than going to strike, in which harms other people's life. And on the outside, when you were to have these negotiations, we believe it's very important because then these doctors get what they want without harming other people's life. So now, what are the importance of everything that we just said? We want to make sure that doctors truly understand the value of life that they already have a responsibility upon, in which they taken with consent to take care of these people's life. Number two is that we wanted these doctors to stand with their vow and not contradict themselves. And lastly, we wanted to avoid the clear jeopardization and destruction of this healthcare system. With that, that's why on the side opposition, we believe that it's better for us to have a negotiation rather than to go on a worthless strike to get what you want. Now, before I move on to my argument, will there be any POIs? I believe no. Now, let's move on to my argument under the tagline of the jeopardization of the healthcare system. Now, let's look at this debate. Let's look at this argument in a very comparative way of what happens in the worst case scenario on the side government and what happens in the best case and worst case scenario on the side opposition. Now, what are the worst case scenario on the side government? Right? The worst case scenario on the side government is when all doctors were to go on a strike. So what happens is that these doctors is basically putting their self-interest diametrically opposing to the government interests. Because understand that government does not tolerate with strike, government does not tolerate with protest. What happens is that the government make these doctors to work regardless, or they would then lay these doctors down. This is a very hard line, a worst case scenario under side government. What happens is that these healthcare system will then loses their trust towards their customers, meaning to say that people might lose their trust towards healthcare system because they see that these doctors that work for them truly don't really care about these people, rather they care about themselves importantly, meaning to say that the image of the healthcare system that is people that people rely on are being tarnished. What happens is that more people will not trust the system, and meaning to say that it will then give birth to the problem of maybe having anti-vaxxers or those people that don't trust the healthcare system entirely. So we should not do this. So what is the worst case under side opposition, right? The worst case under side opposition is when these doctors were to negotiate with the higher ups, believe that they still have to work during that time, meaning that people's lives are still being safe and so on and whatnot, and nobody knows about the problems. What happens is that public trust is still exists, meaning that nothing is affected, but maybe these doctors did not get what they want. This is the worst case on our side, but at least nobody's life is being affected because of these doctors' self-interest. Let's look at the best case scenario on the side government. The best case scenario on the side government is basically their whole case. They try to point that out by saying that, oh, maybe this doctor will only do a soft and hardline strike, where they only strike during when they are not needed. Understand that the problem with this is that it is basically worthless, because in the end of the day, those higher ups does not care on what you do, and then maybe the efficiency of healthcare system is still the same, but then these doctors will not get what they want, meaning they say that their strikes does not work, it does not really harm, it don't give them the mutual benefit they always wanted in the end of the day. Meaning to say that under your side, doctors does not benefit. But how is it under our side? The base case scenario under our side as side opposition is that when these doctors were to have negotiate and they are able to successfully negotiate with their higher ups, the presidents of these hospitals, right? Meaning to say that these doctors would then get what they want, get the resources that they would need and would have and also maybe get a better healthcare, maybe better mental health care, or maybe better salary, or maybe more day off. So we believe that on the outside, doctors are able to benefit without having to sacrifice the rights of other people to be treated as a patient by these doctors, and also by not having to take away the rights of these people to maybe live. Because understand that if you to go on a strike does not happen in 1 or 2 days. Strike need to take a very long time, for example, a few months for it to be very effective. And during that few months, in the worst case scenario on the side government, a lot of lives will be affected. Most importantly, those lives in which need a very extensive care. And those people are the ones that are truly affected under your side. You need to tell me why is it very important for us to take care of the rights of these doctors compared to these patients in which is very innocent. So that it truly proves why side opposition is more humane, and we should take today's case. With that, I rest my case.
Thank you to the Leader of Opposition, Mr. Adam Kazman, for giving the speech. The Leader of Opposition spoke for a total of 7 minutes and 22 seconds. If I was to describe Mr. Adam's speech, I would describe it in 2 words: analytical and very factual, bringing up the Hippocratic Oath and things like that. And I think it reflects very well of his ambition of becoming the chief adjudicator of the Muslim debate in 2025. So maybe the committee can take note on that. But thank you to the Leader of Opposition. I would now like to invite the Deputy Prime Minister, Mr. Iyad Thaqif, to present his speech. Here.
Hello, am I audible?
Yes,
Cool.
you are.
Okay. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. Side opposition looks at the condition where doctors demanding better work conditions to help the state, oftentimes fixing their mistakes. For example, if a person suffocated from carbon monoxide poisoning because the state does not want to invest in public transportation systems, while paying a portion of their income to the same entity that suffocates them. Side opposition looked at this condition and said, no, this is truly justified. We say that it's truly okay to hold them on their neck and suffocate their voices. We say that it's not only principally incorrect, but also practically efficient. And I'll explain that in my argumentation then. Before I move on to my argumentation, let's have a few pieces of rebuttal, shall we? There's 4 pieces. Number 1, let's talk about caveat strikes. Because they told us that caveat strikes are going to be the kryptonite to our case, because it is inefficient and it's not going to be attracting as much attention to the particular issue. 2 responses here, right? Number 1, all health issues are important and incites awareness within society. If that particular person having a flu cannot go to the clinic, is still going to have dissemination of information. Like a lot of cases are still going to be denied. We don't see why. Efficiency is a question here. But number 2, there's still effect onto the state. It's only, we're talking about 1 to 2% time sensitive cases. The other 98% are still going to have a massive effect to the state to begin with, and it's visceral. If one worker doesn't go to work, you said that these kinds of a lot, and it accumulates. You say these are the reasons why all of the is still going to be visceral, and it's still going to be attracting a lot of friction against the state. Let's talk about the balance of rights, because their principal engagement with us was, look, you're incorrect because you had taken a vow, and also you have promised to take care of others' lives, and your lives become second. If I take down this principle, then their case falls. This strike is to help them improve their ability to extend the right to life of these other people. It's a getaway right. This also engages with their vow. If this particular doctor doesn't strike to have better working conditions, and that one particular doctor malfunctions and disrupts their ability to extend the right to life of that random individual, where is that balance of rights to begin with? The empowerment of the balance of rights only exists inside proposition, and you deny that. Yeah, sure.
So are you telling me, so are you telling me it's better for you to do strikes in which harms the healthcare system rather than negotiate which does not harm any of it?
Exactly. Let's move on to my third rebuttal, negotiations. Does it work? Let's ask them. We told you that this doesn't work because the state doesn't prioritize you, because the manifestation of benefits are preferable that is visceral. For example, economic growth. That's why your state prefers to invest, for example, in industrialization, for example, because they can show off their growth for re-election, rather than like healthcare system, for example, which is not something to be flexed off. So then, like, even if you negotiate with your higher ups, then we tell you that it highly becomes inefficient. It goes through a lot of time lag, and we say that it's even like impossible for you to make it to the Legislative Assembly. But second, let's quote you, Prime Minister, Leader of Opposition. On the 5th minute and 50 seconds, you told that higher ups don't care about what you do. Then they had set up a convenient situation, setting up that higher ups in their world are going to hear, pick a side. Let's talk about my last piece of rebuttal. Like, people don't really care about these doctors, so they're going to be distrust in the healthcare system. God, when they have a strike, it's going to be dissemination of information. It's going to be hashtags. They're going to be taking pictures outside of their clinics, and they're going to listen for them, for God's sake. Because the doctors are highly prestigious among society, we said this is the reason why there's not going to be any distrust. In fact, in order for them to expedite the process of getting them recover, for example, go back to the clinic, for example, they will eventually voice out against the state as well. So, like, we don't really see the point of this particular argumentation. Any POIs before I move on to my argumentation? Cool. Let's talk about my argumentation then. How we're able to achieve maximum efficiency of the healthcare system. Level 1, how doctors are able to evaluate their situation. This clearly mitigates any argumentation that's possibly coming from the next speaker after me that say that doctors are going to strike whenever it's convenient and they want the maximum amount of benefits. There are 3 reasons why they're not. Number 1, the passion for saving lives. They say that they are very truly passionate when it comes to saving lives and seeing people walk out of the door of the hospitals freely and healthily. Number 2, like the years of them becoming a doctor means that they have like sparked a moral conscience and understanding what's right and wrong. And number 3, since their journey to becoming a doctor was long and rough, they more like want to get their career to pay off. Conclusion here is this. This means that strikes only happen when it's really bad and they are overworked. For example, not having enough PPE or even not having enough medical supplies. Level 2, why does this happen then? This happens due to corruption or misprioritization by the state. As I told you, how the state does not want to prioritize healthcare system at times, but rather want to prioritize into visceral sectors of the economy for them to get a better support from their voter bases. Level 3, the question here becomes, how do we, only in a side proposition, increase efficiency? Because notice that without the strikes, they go unnoticed for 3 reasons. They're like number 1, people like your complaints undergo through a lot of bureaucracy, and your complaints oftentimes on like very dysfunctional. Number 2 is also hidden and not visceral, because all of these particular conditions are occurring in 4 walls that we call hospitals rather than on the streets, unlike all the other issues that we can talk about. So we see that without all of these reasons, we said there's a reason why strike is truly needed and necessary. This won't happen in our world. What happens in our world is governments will give in. No, thank you. Governments will give in for 2 reasons. They are truly essential. It is counterproductive for you to ignore the demands of the doctors, because you need to notice that the amount of workers that you have contributing to your economy, it also means the construction workers, it also means that they're like general well-being of the society is dependent on the doctors, hence government would truly give in. But number 2, the reason why governments will instantly give in only for a strike is because doctors are truly prestigious among society and people on the ground. So ignoring them is political suicide. You will be plucked in the next election year. The conclusion here is this suicide, governments instantly giving in. For example, it only takes a day in Germany for doctors to strike efficiently, and the German government gave in. The level 4, when it comes to outcomes, we only achieve only on such proposition, we achieve direct problem solving mechanism that not only solves it short term, but it is sustained for long term, because it only takes one memorable event to set precedent for it to for it to be included in history textbooks, or for it to be something to be included in legislative assemblies discussions, in parliamentary discussions. So we say that it only takes one event for a long-term benefit. The conclusion is this: on the comparative from your world, where complaints are merely a A4 paper that you put in a box when you go out of the door, we say that, and also reprioritization of the state isn't able to achieve. They have to work to harsh working conditions. They are prone to malfunctioning that will only lead to hospitals being sued or more people dying. And also them too are not immune to the virus, for example. So what's the outcome? It's clearly like more doctors get infected. The conclusion is this: only on site proposition, you're able to achieve the maximum amount of benefits. This is my last speech my last success speech as a debater from Sekolah Tuanku Abdul Rahman, and I've never been prouder to propose.
Thank you to the Deputy Prime Minister for that speech. The Deputy Prime Minister, Mr. Iyad Thaqif, spoke for a total of 7 minutes and 16 seconds. Mr. Iyad told me that his hope for Malaysia is that Malaysia enforces a democracy and welcomes more bright young minds to spearhead the nation in all aspects. And I think we can certainly say that Malaysia would be happy to have the bright young mind of Mr. Iyad to spearhead Malaysia in the healthcare industry. Now, moving on, I would like to invite the Deputy Leader of Opposition to deliver his speech. Here.
Hello, am I audible?
Yes, you are.
I think the problem on the government's entire paradigm from the very get-go is that they fail to acknowledge the effects of having a strikeout in a society that is largely built upon stakeholders that are very, very important in today's case. I think we were very clear from the very get-go that this debate exists in the current status quo, whereby this is to make the debate even more relevant. We tell you that in a society, for example, in a society that has COVID-19, we tell you that the stakeholders or the patients are the most vulnerable in that sense, and the doctors, and in order for the doctors to help these patients, we tell you that it's much better on our side. Before I move any further, a few rebuttals coming from EAT's very, very extremely wobbly case coming from government's entire paradigm. Firstly, they talked about how the mechanism coming from government side will be able to be mitigated. Firstly, we tell you that the trade-off that we've already provided is much better because it does not constitute the harm, or it does not result in the harming of stakeholders at the very end of the day. And secondly, I'm going to give you extensive reason as to why principally it is harmful. Second level of analysis, they talked about how doctors are human while shamelessly, ignorantly rejecting the main stakeholder here, who are the patients. We tell you that under our case, we are able to benefit not only the patients, we are also able to benefit the government as well as the doctors at the very end of the day, because notice that our case is much more soft line, and we tell you the reason behind this, the very root of our case is precisely because of this because discussions happen without external blame put on individuals who do not have anything to do with the problem at the very first place, right? Other than that, they talked about how their policy does not attack how striking will attack the state. We tell you, yes, no, it will not necessarily attack the state. It will attack the stakeholders at the very end of the day. And even if you talk about, you attack, you do not come to one meeting at the very end of the day, and hence you attack the state. No, you do not just attack the state. You attack the state. You attack the stakeholders, and you put them in a scenario that they are harmed at the very end of the day. And we tell you that is principally abhorrent to begin with, right? So, other than that, I'm going to talk about the effectivity point, right? Because that was the biggest point coming from government side. That was what the case is largely based upon. We tell you that first, under our work is much better. Why? Because when you strike, or doctors strike, they strike alone. However, when we are able to engage in political discourse, when we are in negotiations, when we are able to discuss about this problem in social media and so on and so forth, that is when it becomes effective, because you are able to garner a lot more support at the very end of the day, and therefore gaining traction. Second level of analysis is that understand the worst case scenario on the government side that they fail to acknowledge at all is the fact that you cause problems. That the worst case scenario is that you cause problems, and therefore you put your doctors with their interests will be diametrically opposed to the interest of the government. Government doesn't like this. For example, recently, not Sri Lanka, an Southeast Asian country, a couple of doctors they stroke out. So what happens is, at the very end of the day, the government gains more power because these doctors will end up being fired at the very end of the day. We tell you that this is a principle that isn't effective at the very end of the day. So before I move any further, would I like to be any POIs, please? No, right. So we were very clear on our mechanism. I'm going to tell you and how we are able to benefit these societies as a whole. Practically, I'm going to tell you how we are able to win this debate in principle, because this is something government entirely ignored, and I'm going to tell you why this is the most important thing in this debate. The violation of rights. First, who is at fault here? We tell you that the people who are at fault here are the healthcare bodies. Why? Because they have the accountability and they have the responsibility over many different sectors within the government. They are the one who controls whatever happens within the government. So if, let's say, the healthcare falls, or COVID-19 rates increase, is entirely the fault of the government. But secondly, who will be affected through striking at the very end of the day? Patients, victims. These are very, very urgent stakeholders that government does not cater to at the very end of the day, and largely ignored. What happens then is that striking at the very end of the day, as a punishing mechanism, so on and so forth, will not, the retribution factor of it, the retribution factor isn't propagated towards the the healthcare bodies at the very end of the day. It will be propagated to stakeholders who do not have anything to do with the problem at the very end, like in the first place, at the very end of the day. Second level analysis is that the other stakeholders are like the hospitals and so on and so forth. The hospitals have no control over like, they have no accountability over the healthcare of the entire state. Therefore, when you strike out, you harm the hospitals, you harm the stakeholders, but you harm the patients. You do not harm the government at the very end of the day. We tell you the government is to be put in blame here. We expect a response later on. We dare you. Second level analysis. They talk about how doctors have. I'm going to tell you how doctors have a vow. Why is this vow important at the very first place? Firstly, it is made by the consent of the doctors before they become doctors. Second level analysis that even if they are the reason that they are important is because of financial consideration. They respect the fact that even though they are like very, very important members of society, the financial capital could also be put to other people. Therefore, we are able to maximize the quality or the honesty in healthcare in that sense. So what happens here? We're able to help patients in this the vow constitutes things such as helping patients and prioritizing their patients' lives. Government, on the other hand, the entire principle that they do not justify at all is that they're willing to discredit and neglect the value of these responsibilities at the very end of the day, hence violating the principle and the moral obligation that these doctors have to begin with. We expect like that is something that they ignore entirely. Respect. They have the right to complain at the very end of the day, and we do have a mechanism for that. That is our trade-off. We are able to have political discourse with discussion and discourse against the government, and we are able to actually gain traction because under our world, not only is it more effective because you gain more traction, second level analysis, it is also much lower risk, and considering the fact that the worst case scenario on the government side is highly probable, we tell you that it's not a risk worth taking. And the risk factor here is that understand that since society right now in COVID-19 times are the most vulnerable ever. Taking a risk when you know it's going to fall at the very end of the day is something that's principally abhorrent and irresponsible coming from government side at the very to begin with. So under government side, you harm the wrong people and you propagate the harms to stakeholders. How is our negotiation factor better? First, you propagate the harm directly to the bodies and therefore at the very end of the day, the bodies, not only is it justified, it will incentivize these bodies to take into consideration the factors, the healthcare bodies to take into consideration the factors like that's practically. But principally, you are justified because it's a correct form of retribution because you propagate the harms towards the correct people. Second, since the government concedes to the fact that they're through shameless ignorance that these stakeholders are the most important thing, we acknowledge the fact that it is the responsibility of the doctors as well as the accountability of the government. We are able to save the people towards more effective measures, and we are able to provide help to the people. Principally, government exacerbates the already detrimental harm that currently exists within the status quo. This is a bit clear.
Thank you to the Deputy Leader of Opposition for giving his speech. The Deputy Leader of Opposition spoke for a total of 7 minutes and 33 seconds. Mr. Adam Haikal's speech was very big on protecting the stakeholders, and I think it will serve him well as his ambition hopes to be the next, or not the next, but the school principal of Sekolah Dato Abdul Rahman. I hope the students as primary stakeholders in SDAR will flourish under his administration. Now, I would like to invite the government whip to present his speech. Here.
Am I clear?
Yes, you are.
Amidst the rise of COVID-19, it has never been more prevalent how doctors are one of the most, or now, if not the most important individuals, communities in society. However, it's highly regrettable that doctors are one of the most underappreciated people, one of the most underappreciated individuals, and they are treated like trash. It is time these things stop, and it is time a side cares, and the side that cares in this debate is side of government. So let's go through a few things that happened throughout this debate, and I will tell you how self-government has clearly been the side that's told you very important and structural reasons onto why it it is justified for these doctors to strike as compared to our opposition who only analyze things on surface level. So the first thing, however, the idea of principle argumentation. The Prime Minister has done an excellent job in telling you how every worker in general has a right to strike, and especially when it comes to doctors, right? Especially when doctors actually extend the rights of life to other people. What this means is everyone has a right to life, everyone has a right to live, right? But the person who is extending the right to live, meaning the well-being of other people, are mostly comprising of doctors. So due to this fact, the doctors have a right to function properly. These doctors have a right to have the proper equipment for them to function properly. If these doctors don't function properly in the first place, other people, these patients will not have their, a right to have their lifelong longevity extended will not happen because these doctors do not have a proper working conditions. So on a principle front, the side of government has given you layer by layer analysis, but suddenly side of opposition comes here and say you want a vow, things like that. This is very, very nonsensical because we've told you clearly how on a principle level we take away this debate. But that's the first thing. The second thing, however, we've told you how on the idea of healthcare, we've given you a lot of reasons why doctors strike and a lot of reasons why also they will do things like caveat strikes. I mean, like, it is as if side of opposition here is trying to say that these doctors strike because they want a vacation or want things of their own self-interest. It is an insult to the doctor's professionalism. It is an insult to the doctor as a doctor to suddenly say that you are trying to strike because you want something personal. No, these doctors strike for the good, for the betterment of other people. They want other people to have better facilities. They want the government to give enough ventilators. They want the government to give you enough oxygen tanks. Therefore, they do your said strikes. Like we said before, doctors strike with passion. Doctors strike with moral conscience. They are doctors after all.
Your eye.
At the end of the day, doctors strike when it is actually absolutely suitable for them to do so, of course.
How are you able to guarantee us that this doctor will only strike for the sake of other people and not for the self-interest?
Like we said before, I've given you like a lot of reasons, right? Given you a lot, I just gave you three reasons. The first of all, the idea of they are passionate people. We all know like becoming a doctor, the road to becoming a doctor, universities and such are the hardest roads possible we can take. So that already shows how they are passionate. And we also tell you how doctors are the most morally conscious people. They deal with people dying every single day. They deal with people crying over other people dying every single day. They know what it's like to be good. They know the idea of good and wrong. They know the idea of good and bad. I've also told you how the idea of paying off. Okay, it is very been clearly stated in the second speaker's speech. So on a side note, let me just say that strike doesn't necessarily take months, number one, because these people, these doctors can evaluate things. Like we all done history, right? We all know upon the idea of hartal. That certain one day where people don't buy in markets, that one single day was enough to change the Malaysian economic landscape for many decades to come. So this clearly proves that how strikes are, number one, done accordingly in timingly, and number two, they don't really take long. So the idea of suddenly people striking, one person striking, and they won't actually have a proper impact is very, very false at the end of the day. So that's the two. I mean, like, so that's what government has said. Now let's go to what side opposition has said. Side of opposition, first of all, I told you about the whole nonsensical principle upon the idea of doctors have a vow. Okay, doctors have a vow. But the thing is, we say no. Doctor, we say that doctors do have vow, but the thing is, doctors do caveat strikes because doctors are intellectual individuals. Due to them being intellectual individuals, they will most likely do caveat strikes. And what about these people after all? But the second thing, the idea of negotiation. We've told you how negotiation will not work because the government do not have a proper incentive to do anything because the government doesn't lose anything. As compared to one on our side, we have told you how when strikes happen, I mean, like, I can give you four reasons, right? Four reasons that I've been stated before. We've told you how doctors are essential people in the workforce. If the government doesn't have these people, this government cannot function properly. They are of high prestige. If these doctors do not want them, these doctors do not support the government, they will most likely lose in your elections. And we told you also how people on ground or on an international level, in fact, people will continuously poke at you, poke at the government and say that you need to do something right now. All these regions clearly show how in comparison, it is a landslide when you want to say about the feasibility or the probability of government actually taking action. On your side, governments get emails that are pushed aside. On our side, government are getting constant backlash. Therefore, government will actually have to do something. And on an ending note, let me tell you the cases on both sides. So in the worst cases of scenario on our side, people actually die in your strikes. And we say that it's absolutely fine because we have better people. If hundreds of people die during the strike, we believe that better healthcare can benefit millions of people in the future. As compared to your side, as compared to your side, if I'd say on your side, on the worst case of a scenario, people are safe on a certain day of strike, but the healthcare system is fragile. The healthcare system is not as good on our side. And on the best case of the scenario, we say that on the best case of a scenario on both sides, you both get better healthcare. But the thing here is the incentive on side of from the state, from the government, will not be as strong in government. It will not be as strong as inside the government. Meaning that maybe in both cases of scenario, best cases, both sides will get better healthcare. But the thing is, the government will do absolutely much more in government as compared to the world of opposition, where they just get your emails and papers in boxes. With all those reasons, I have to say that this may be my last speech, and I hope it was a good one. Thank you.
Thank you to the government whip for that speech. The government whip spoke for a total of 7 minutes and 19 seconds. I think Mr. Khairi, as the government whip, explained the government stance very clearly and in a very descriptive manner, and it is on par as well with his ambition of becoming an author. So I believe his books are going to be very clear, very descriptive as well in the future. I look forward to reading them. Now, for the final substantive speech, I would like to call upon the opposition whip, Mr. Aimil.
Hello, good evening. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Thank you very much. I will be starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. When government side has the contemplation whereby the basis of their ideology is contingent upon the fact that revolves around their alternative and implementation of the motion whereby doctors are allowed to leave their work in order to go strike, that's when we see a loophole in their case from the very get-go. That's when we see that the problem that they have stated from the very start of the motion does not match with the solutions that they have portrayed or they have painted in their case in the start of the debate, right? So first and foremost, let's summarize both sides' cases, right? Let's look at on the opposition side. On the opposition side, generically, we have the moral high ground. We have proposed to you the existence of alternatives like negotiation within hospital communities, thereby disproving to you the effectiveness of going on strike or the urgency of going on strike anyways, right? 4 things we have told you. Number 1, we have told you regarding that doctors have already conceded upon the responsibility of having this occupation itself, right? And number 2, we already told you that rights to protest that government side is trying to fight for here is only valid if it does not harm other people, i.e. these patients or people who are in dire need of medical attention, right? Number 3, we told you that strikes will further push prejudice against these doctors and instead of government, right? And number 4, we have already told you that the effects economically and socially happen better under our side because government under our side does not lose anything in our case, right? So let's look at a glimpse of government side's motion or case, right? First and foremost, they told you regarding that doctors will only strike when it's convenient, i.e. when they have like a surgery, then they won't strike. They will attend to their patients, right? And if they don't have surgery or any like appointments, then they will go on strike, right? Several responses to be stated into this, but it will be further integrated into my issues, right? And next thing they claim that under our side, we silence doctors and don't give them any right to speak out or create awareness regarding the overworking productivity in hospital communities, which we believe is very false anyways, right? So I'm going to tell you 3 reasons as to why government side's case is so flawed at the very start of the motion. Right? Number 1, the mechanization that they have proposed shouldn't even be classified as a mechanization. Because why? Because we tell you that 1, it is not principally justified, and number 2, it does not even bring mutual or beneficial impacts anyways, right? And will be further integrated into my issues. Number two, they are only giving excuses for doctors or healthcare workers to not work even more. And number three, that playing by the logic of government side, right? Since these doctors or healthcare workers are so detrimentally overwhelmed, since they are so overworked, so going by the same logical umbrella here, then they are highly likely to go on full strike at the very start of the motion, right? They are highly likely, even when they have like 10-hour surgeries, notice that these 10-hour surgeries is what causes these doctors to burn out in the first place, is what causes these doctors to become tired of working as a doctor, right? So all the more reason for them to not go by the mechanization that government side is proposing, right? So let's look at a few rebuttals. First and foremost, they had not clarified regarding like the guarantee of doctors being so passionate or they are the most prestigious people within the nation, right? Four responses. Number one, that in of itself per se is not a guarantee because that is an assumption coming from government side. Number two, if doctors are so overworked and like as described by my government, as I described just now, then it plays under the same logical umbrella that they will go on full strike and not attend to the patients that are in dire need of medical attention, right? And number three, if even cases like rape or like a forced drug abuse towards these patients still happens within status quo, then how are you still going to support the point that, all doctors are passionate, all doctors will prioritize their patients at the end of the day, which we believe is so false coming from side government, right? And number four, even if the effectivity of like both sides is the same, even if, then the probability is still not, which government side is proposing such a high risk anyways. So let's look at a few issues within this debate. Two issues. Number one is in terms of healthcare systems. Which side will actually improve or benefit the patients or people who require dire medical attention? No, thank you. Number one, on the government side, we have already proved to you that it will disrupt the flow of the healthcare system, and it will be then there will be more existence of less operating doctors, right? And that in of itself endangers lives, especially through examples like COVID, where even Prime Minister conceded upon that these situations or circumstances are existent within society, right? Number two, if government side wants to combat problems so much under their logical umbrella, then opposition side already proposed to you that the alternatives that they can opt into, for example, are negotiations within those hospital communities that in that sense will disprove the sense of urgency that government side is trying to paint on so much from the very start of the motion. Number two is regarding the principle of everything. Three responses. Number one, rights to protest, as I had said before, is only valid if you don't harm other people, i.e. these patients, right? And even though like government side has tried to come to us and tell you that, this won't happen, or like these rights are valid, we have already, all three speakers under opposition side bench has already disproved this theory, right? Number two, I've already told you that doctors have already conceded upon these responsibilities in their like pre-doctor oaths or like pre-doctor vows. No, thank you. Which means that they will prioritize like which means like the harms that government side is trying to paint upon our world will not even exist, right? And number three, understand that what opposition side wanted to hear is why is going on strikes so justified under your side, even though it exists so much detrimental harms within that mechanization anyways, right? So let's look at the effects, or let's paint the world under government side, right? Number one, doctors will face intoleration by government, as explained by Adam, right? And number two, healthcare systems are still put on halt, and which will likely include like prejudice push against doctors, and also lives of patients who are in dire need of medical attention are jeopardized, right? And so as a conclusion, in today's debate, opposition side has already told you regarding the principles of everything, the principles of the mechanization, how under our side, we protect the rights of these patients, and how we have told you that doctors leaving their workplaces in order to go strike, which at the end of the day won't even bring out so impactful outcomes, will not even be effective, right? That's why we believe the opposition side should win. Thank you.
Thank you to the opposition whip. The opposition whip spoke for a total of 7 minutes and 19 seconds. And I think I can picture or understand why Mr. Aimil is very hard on opposing the right for doctors to strike, because he wants Malaysia to be a very peaceful and harmonious nation on par with first world countries. So he believes in negotiation and discourse. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we have reached the end of the substantive speeches. We will now move on to the reply speeches. But before that, please give me some time to change the timer for the reply timer. Can everyone see my screen for the reply timer?
Yeah.
All right, thank you. With that, we will proceed with the reply speeches for today's debate. Now, I would like to invite Mr. Adam Kazman as the leader of opposition to present the reply speech for the opposition side. Here.
Hello there, General Kenobi. Am I audible for this final mumble?
Yes, you are.
All right, cool. All right, I will start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Now, in today's debate, things have boiled down to two very important things, which is the effectiveness and also the rights of these people, the rights of doctors and so the rights of these patients. Now, let's talk about the first and very important clash in today's debate, the effectiveness that exists in today's debate. Now, what happens on the side opposition? We tell you, side opposition, we tell you that it's better for us to have negotiation for you, for these doctors to garner the benefit that they wanted. For example, certain doctors wanted to have more days off, certain doctors want better health, mental health care for these doctors because they are currently going through depression and PTSD. So believe that it's important for these doctors to have what they want. But the difference in today's debate between both sides is that side government wanted to do strikes and on the side opposition, we wanted to use negotiation. So what happens in today's debate? Sure, on the side government, they tell you how it is faster because strike can truly attack people who are in power. But understand that these on their side, they are going very soft line by saying that, oh, they're going go strike on certain problems, certain cases in which that they are not needed. We believe that this is not effective because of the fact that then these people who are in power are not truly affected by those strikes, and we believe that these strikes happen during work, meaning to say that many of other people's life are at stake. So understand that when under their side, when they do this type of strike, it does not really does much, and also it might even harms the constitution, also harm the very nature and image and tarnish the image of healthcare system in the end of the day, because then people will lose trust towards the healthcare system because they know that these doctors would usually act on their personal interest, because understand that doctors are also human and so as the patient. So we need to see that clearly. When this doctor were to strike for their own personal interest, people will lose trust with the healthcare system. This is when we see the problem of maybe anti-vaxxers or maybe people that don't even trust the healthcare system in the first place, which is something that side government really never touched or never really attacked on under our side. And second, we say that under our side, when we used to negotiation, sure, it might take more longer because you need to go through a lot of legislative stuff, but understand that this is better because in the end of the day, we aren't harming other people's life. We aren't doing much, and negotiation can happen out of work. So believe that on the outside, negotiation might take longer compared to strikes, but in the end of the day, it is more effective because the doctors can get what they want peacefully without having to harm other people. So this is why on the outside, we believe that effectiveness, we might not win in a sense of time, but we might win in a sense of how we will ensure that this happen without harming and also destroying, tarnish the image of doctors and healthcare. Now, rights. I understand that in today's debate, it's really important for us to clarify rights because on our side, we tell you that doctors have rights to protest, but to a certain extent. But on the side of government, they say the doctors have rights to protest whenever they want because it is very important to help them. Understand that if your rights to protest harms a lot of other people, this is not justified and we will not tolerate to this, because understand that one doctor might be taking care of probably 10 patients. So why would you value the one right of this doctor to protest in then these 10 people that are taking care of these rights to leave of this patient in the end of the day? We believe that this is very problematic, and this is something that state government have really considered. They say that, oh, it's okay, we just let these people die because then at the end of the day, you might have better healthcare. This is very problematic. State government is truly inhumane compared to on the outside where we go through negotiation. The doctors still go to work. The doctor do have these negotiations with the higher up, because understand that every hospital have an authority, have a precedent in which they could negotiate and also give ideas in order to help this doctor to perform better and help more people. In this sense, we are able to protect the rights of this doctor to get what they want, but not by protest, but the rights to complain to these higher ups rather than going on strike, which harms a lot of people, harms this patient. And outside, we believe that we are able to save more stakeholder compared to site government, because site government, the only stakeholder they're able to save is this doctor rights. But in the end of the day, they destroy everyone's rights, the healthcare system and everyone. With that, go opt for side opposition, because we're never going to give you up, we're never going to let you down, and we're never going to run around and desert you. With that, I end my final speech as a debater. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mr. Adam Kazman, for the very spirited reply speech. Now I would like to move on to the final speech for today, the government reply. I kindly invite the Deputy Prime Minister, Mr. Iyad Takif. Here.
Hello, am I audible?
Yes, you are.
All right. Okay. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. Side opposition sadly spent a total of 25 minutes defending a fictitious world that is probably the status quo, that is the complaints that you make to the hospital manager actually makes it to the ministry, actually makes it to parliamentary discussions in order for you to actually pass a law, for example. They or even ministry, make ministerial changes. We see that these kinds of changes are only fictitious and also only can be dreamt of inside opposition. The changes that will be manifested can only be achieved when there's enough friction against the state in order for it to comply within the demands of the voice of the people who's voicing out in today's debate. Let's talk about opposition's mistakes, and I'll divide this analysis into the principal front and to the practical front. Let's talk about the principal front here for a minute, because they told us that the principle here is that they took a vow and then they had the moral obligation to extend the life of a lot of people. So we already responded to you in my speech, and if you completely ignored it, I don't know if it was a lag or not, but we already responded how it was to get to it, right? In order for you to enforce the balance of right, in order for you to have the higher ability to extend the right to life to many other people in terms of quantity to begin with, we say that it is necessary for you to go out of the clinic and actually have a strike to begin with. So we don't see how we haven't responded to this, and we say that we actually win when it comes to this principle of balance of rights at the end of the day. But then they told us they won when it comes to the moral high ground. Side opposition is 6 feet deep in morality. Even in the most dire of cases, it's a trade-off for thousands more in their world that walk into the clinic to never walk out again because you don't have enough ventilators, you don't have enough ICU beds. The only inside opposition that particular situation can occur. Yes, it might occur in proposition, but it might occur only for 1 or 2 days, as we see, for example, in Germany, for example. Let's move on to the practical front here. Because they told us that our case was soft line, we already told you, no, the impact's magnitude is large enough, I told you in my rebuttal, and not everyone in the clinic has a heart transplant on the same day. So you have to understand that particular impact. But also second, when it comes to negotiations, we give you 2 reasons that were unresponded, which is bureaucracy and viscerality of the effect to begin with. Thirdly, they also defended this discussions and forums, for example. We don't see why you can't have that too, especially after that particular strike, and a particular strike, there will still be forums because it was a memorable national event to begin with. So that, and then also the discussions are most likely going to be flooded out with a lot of other discussions in that particular state. Now, the comparative here is on your work, they're going to have harsh working conditions. So now let's see how you gonna gain the higher moral high ground when you have to defend the deaths of a lot of other people due to the inefficiency of the state when there's not enough oxygen tanks to begin with, and there's a huge time lag because your complaint mechanism has to go through a lot of stages. So now, even in the context of COVID, for example, now your doctors are going to be infected as well, and as you can see, there are doctor infections. We don't see how you gain the you win the practical front into this debate. And then there's something about trust. We already told you that we already responded to this. We told you that dissemination of information could occur. What is propositions, good deeds in today's debate? On the principal front, we told you that they are still workers. They contribute a lot to the state. Oftentimes, it is fixing the state's mistake. For example, helping drug abusers, victims of drug abusers sparked by poverty cycle overlooked by the state. And on the state, on side opposition is the one is going to tape their mouths because they are being nosy, fixing the mistake that the state conveniently overlooked. On the practical front as well, we get a fast problem-solving mechanism because it's counterproductive and it's political suicide, as I told you in my speech. And also it's going to be sustained. It only takes one strike in order for the government in our worlds are going to learn their lesson. So as a conclusion to my entire speech, everything that Sekolah Tuanku Abdul Rahman clearly takes today's debate. I'm very proud to propose.
Thank you for the reply speech from the government side. Thank you, everyone. This officially ends the debate for today. I think it was a very intense and very spirited debate. I was personally blown away by all the speeches and substantives presented by both teams. I would also like to congratulate both teams for making it thus far to the finals. May the best team win. Before we proceed to be dismissed, can I please invite everyone to turn on their cameras, especially the debaters, for a group picture. All right, give me a second, yeah. All right. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm missing one more debater. Okay, 6. All right, thank you. I can invite the judges as well if they would like to turn on their cameras. Maybe a 5-second buffer time. All right, I guess not. All right, 1, 2, 3. All right, thank you, everybody. Right now, we have ended the English category debate. We will be dismissed and the debaters are invited to join the closing ceremony at 7:45 at the same Zoom link for the announcement of the results. Thank you and have a good dinner.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, Star.
Thank you very much.
Right, thank you so much. Thank you, Star.
Judges for the finals, can you guys head to the adjudicators room?